Honorable Justice Pushpen Bhati was a visiting professor in our university. She comes from a very illustrious family of jurists, and I am very proud to be associated with the family since last 20 years. And I am really benefited by a lot of guidance of her father, of her brother, and now we have she as our guiding force. And it's really a privilege to host you, ma'am. And I have seen our School of Law has been hosting late Jetnani sir. Then we had recently Supreme Court judges, Justice Kaul, then Justice Sikri. And I have seen those who have that passion to connect with the students, with faculty. They agree and they take out their time from their otherwise very busy schedule to interact. This is one of the very finest characteristic, ma'am, of legal fraternity and legal humanities, and we are highly indebted because your guidance certainly helps all of us, especially our girls student. We have around 50% girls student, and we have more than 70% women faculty member in our School of Law. So when you interact with us, they get a role model and they get a lot of confidence. So we are thankful that you have spared your time, otherwise from a very busy schedule. And I have been requesting you since last many months, and somehow we were not able to connect physically. So thanks to technology, we are connected from comforts of our home. Preamble to the Constitution of India provides for equality and dignity of the individual. And Article 14 of the Indian Constitution provides that a state shall not deny to any person equality before law or equal protection of the law. We have seen in military forces, women, as Ms. Harpreet has pointed out, they were granted commission in non-combatant roles, and they were granted only short service commissions, and they were asked to leave when they completed 14 years of services. So this issue was pending in court, and in February this year, Justice Dharmendra Chanchud has delivered a judgment, and we are very proud of you, ma'am, that you were the main pleader in this case who took this case to the logical conclusion. And in this case, Apex Court ordered central government to ensure that women are granted permanent commission. But unfortunately, there are some still some stumbling blocks, like these women officers are being asked to clear junior commandant courses and some physical training which are not easy to clear. So let us see how things unfold. But personally, I have seen women, they add a lot of value to any organization. As I was mentioning, in School of Law, we have women faculty member, and their contribution is second to none. And wherever women enter, they bring a lot of positive change in the organization. And I'm sure, like many other industrialized nations of the world, India will also open its gate to women in competent and non-competent both roles. And I have no doubt that this will add value. And all these prejudices and all these apprehensions, I don't think they are based upon any empirical study. They are just prejudices. They will certainly go, and your contribution in this regard shall be always remembered. They will go down in history. It's a huge legacy. So, ma'am, once again, I take this opportunity to welcome you. Amidst our participants, we have more than 130 participants, and so they are so eager to listen from you. So, ma'am, thank you very much, and I once again welcome you in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for very, very kind words that you have spoken for me. I'm not sure if I deserve them all, but indeed, it's a great privilege for me to be here. It's an honor to be connecting with students of law, because even when we practice law, we continue to be students of law. As lawyers, there's one thing that we enroll to do, and a law student, which continues for you throughout life, is when we are practicing law, is that we continue to be students of law. And therefore it is very, very interesting and nice to actually connect with students from the faculty who are on the campuses, with their energy, with their dynamism, and with their vibrance. So I'm going to make sure that I talk about the cases that I have dealt with, and of course the topic is directly connected with those cases. But please keep your questions or comments ready, because we will have that, and that is something that I really look forward to. Now, Pradeep sir mentioned about the constitutional provisions. All of us know how constitutional provisions have been enshrined. In fact, our constitution became that watershed moment when the country was 500 plus princely states were coming together. 1/6 of the population of the world was coming together to live as a free democratic republic country. It was an incredible moment, just not just for our country, but for humanity, for mankind. And in that moment, we decided to give ourselves, our founding fathers laid down for us these set of principles which we respect as the constitution of our country, which is the grand norm, which actually defines what our country is. And in the constitution, gender justice, it was exhilarating to note that gender justice was something that was given a lot of importance, that was exalted to the level of not just being a fundamental right by ensuring that equality is deeply ingrained and constitutionally protected under Part 3 of the Constitution. What is interesting is that the battle for gender justice has been a long battle. It was only about 100 years back, now 102 to be precise, that women actually got the right of adult franchise in the most developed countries that we talk about. So this has been a very, very interesting journey for gender justice and gender parity for women. And our constitution actually allowed women to start that journey on a very high pedestal where equality was enshrined in Part 3. And it was taken a step further, and affirmative action was prescribed to ensure that the generations of inequality and indignities that women as a class had undergone, there is some effort made to make affirmative action. Now, the concept of equality under the Indian Constitution is very beautifully explained to mean equality amongst equals. Because if you have equality amongst unequals, that actually means it is like perpetuating inequality. Now, the battle for equality for women in the armed forces is also a battle that the whole world has fought. It's not something that was peculiar just to India. Like Harpreet ji pointed out, it was only in 1992 that women were first taken in the armed forces in India. In fact, a policy decision was made in 1991, and it was decided that on an experimental basis, women will be included in the Indian Army, Indian Air Force, and Indian Navy. And it was supposed to be only for 5 years on an experimental basis. Of course, it was non-combat arms that they were included in. These are non-combat arms, combat support arms. So women were taken in from 1992 onwards. Initially, they served for 5 years, which was the initial tenure, where they thought they will see how women are performing. Women performed very well. Kudos to the women who actually performed so well in the defense forces. And mind you, when we say combat support roles, it doesn't mean that they have cushy jobs in headquarters. These women officers have, from their induction, performed in the forward areas, because combat support, I mean, they've served to be engineers, and engineers are actually ahead of the infantry. They first go and see the mine clearance, they lay down the mines and the initial, then there are other jobs. They're actually working in, hand in hand and shoulder to shoulder in forward areas, in hostile areas. India has a peculiarity, we all know. Despite being at peace, and despite having fought in only very limited wars as an independent country, we have a particular neighbor that keeps us engaged in a proxy war in our own territory, and therefore there have been a number of occasions of armed conflicts and hostile proxy war situations, which is an ongoing process that the Indian Defense Forces have had to deal with. So when women started off their journey for 5 years, their performance was found to be so excellent and above the board that they were given another extension of 5 years. That extension was again extended for a period of 4 years. So for Army, Air Force, Navy, all three services, the initial experimentative induction of women officers, which was to be for 5 years, actually continued for 14 years. And then the battle for permanent commission actually started, because these were women who were taken in only for short service. The cases for Short Service Commission were initially filed in the Delhi High Court in 2005. It was initially filed as a public interest litigation by one Babita Punia, who was a lawyer practicing in Delhi High Court. She, I believe, now is in the judiciary in Delhi, but she started this PIL. It was in her name. Then we had women officers who joined in. There were specific writ petitions filed on their behalf. And ultimately, that battle, by that time, the issue of permanent commission was considered. Now, let me tell you a little about what is the difference between short service commission and permanent commission. So short service commission is initially for a period of 5 years, and it can go up to a period of 14 years. The tenures keep on varying, but by and large, these tenures at different times, the policy decisions are different. They may take it at different levels, but usually these are between 5 to 14 years of period. Permanent commission is when the personnel are allowed to serve for 20 years plus. It actually, Army, Air Force, and Navy, all three services have variable ages of retirement. It depends on the rank that the officer is holding. So the retirement actually starts from the age of 50, 52, depending on what rank, because Defense Forces have a different system of keeping the forces. It's a pyramidal structure, and keeping the forces fighting fit and younger. So that's how the retirement ages are varying. But the primary difference is that permanent commission allows a person to work till superannuation of that rank, and it allows the person the benefits of pension, emoluments, a secured career, etc. Otherwise, after 10 to 14 years of service, you get enrolled at an age of 23, 24, maybe 25. So in 15 years, at the age of between 36, 37 to about 40, 42, you have to, after giving the best years of your life to the organization, you have to fend for yourself, and you have to find get out and find a job elsewhere. So this was the anomaly which actually took women officers to the Delhi High Court. Delhi High Court considered the issue threadbare. While the matters were pending before the Delhi High Court, the Indian Air Force and the Indian Navy, they granted permanent commission to women officers, but they granted permanent commission prospectively. So they said, we will grant permanent commission to women officers who have been enrolled from here onwards. This decision for Air Force and Navy came in 2006, but it was implemented from 2008 onwards. I'm just giving you, I've dealt with all the three cases, of course, prior to my appointment, the recent appointment as Additional Solicitor General of India, after which, of course, while I hold this appointment, I cannot appear for any private parties, but this is a matter that I did prior to my appointment, and of course, a matter that I closely relate to and associate myself to. In fact, I believe that it was an honor and a privilege for me to be representing some extremely brave and valiant women officers of the Defense Forces. So, so in all the three services, that's how the hierarchy goes. And when 2006 they took a decision, Army took a decision to grant permanent commission in 2 of the arms. Slowly, they enhanced the arms in which they were taking women in all the 3 forces. Initially, it was experimentative, few arms, and then Army went up to 10 arms, 10 streams in which women were taken, and they said, we will grant permanent commission to women in 2 of these arms, which was Judge Advocate General and Army Education Corps. So by the time the judgment of Delhi High Court came, the Delhi High Court judgment came on 12th of March 2010. This was a judgment of Honorable Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, as his lordship then was in the Delhi High Court. So he was the author of this judgment in Delhi High Court. Pradeep ji mentioned that he was one of the speakers who came and interacted with the students. Of course, despite all the constitutional guarantees, constitutional principles, it takes a very progressive and a very visionary judge and bench to actually, recognize those constitutional principles throughout. Army, Air Force, Navy, these are very specialized military forces. Usually the courts do not interfere in their functioning. Also, these are policy decisions, to have women, not to have women, in what manner they should be had. Courts are very hands off in interfering on those policy decisions. But it took very visionary and progressive judges to at all levels of this battle in the courts that in the Delhi High Court, first they said no, women have to be granted. If they kept their hands off again for women in combat. They said we're not going to decide on whether women should be taken in combat or not. That is a decision for the government of India to take on the basis of empirical data, on the basis of the strategy, on the basis of their considerations. But the premise on which the Delhi High Court judgment is founded is, if a woman is good enough for 14 years, she's good enough for 20 years. It's not like you're asking her to do a job that you have not given her. You have already given her that job. She has performed exceedingly well in that job. You have recognized her courage, her gallant, her proficiency, her excellence. And these are women who have performed exceedingly well. Despite the constitutional principles, if the women had not performed, so this judgment is really no thanks to anybody else but the women themselves, who have performed so well in the army in the last about 3 decades now, that we had such strong judgments coming, first from the Delhi High Court, and then, of course, it took almost a decade in the Supreme Court of India. The matter kept on pending. There were reasons for the pendency. On several stages it came up for hearing, but the successive governments of the day, they kept on dilly-dallying. Oh, we are ourselves giving permanent commission, allow us to make that decision. In fact, it was in the December of 2019 that almost like a red flag last warning was given from the court, that if you want to take the credit for this decision, you want to come with a decision, you go ahead and do it. If you don't, then we are not going to keep our hands off, and we are going to give a judgment. So in its journey in the Supreme Court, it was the case actually took so much time because the government kept on saying that we are doing it, and then the pendency of matters in the courts are very large. In India, we have that problem of huge pendencies. But finally, when the matters, one more very important milestone that happened for this matter was on 15th August 2018, when the Prime Minister of our country announced from the ramparts of the Red Fort that permanent commission will be granted to women officers of the army. Now, so political decision was taken at the highest level. The Prime Minister of our country, the Honorable Prime Minister, announces it. So at the highest level, the policy decision is taken. Mind you, by this time, just to remind you again, before the Delhi High Court itself, Air Force and Navy had already decided. Army had also decided for 2 of the streams, but they kept on dilly-dallying for all others. Meanwhile, they kept on expanding the streams that they were taking women in. But when the decision was taken by the political heads that permanent commission will be granted, and the notification was issued. See, we as students of law should understand that even after political decision is taken at the highest level, when it comes to the execution or the implementation of the decision, how, there are slips between the cup and the lip. So with that decision, actually, there was really no need for the Supreme Court, for the matter to continue in Supreme Court. The decision was taken. It ought to have been granted. But the notification that came in pursuance of that policy decision was a notification that came on 25th February 2019. And in that notification, they said that it will be granted to women officers prospectively. Again, the same thing that the Navy and the Army, Air Force was doing from 2008 onwards, decision in 6, but implementation in 2008. They said we will give it to women officers prospectively, which means all these women officers who have been enrolled from 1992 onwards, who have been serving and performed the best years of their, Supreme Court, when the Delhi High Court judgment came, when union came in Supreme Court, there was no stay granted. The Supreme Court did not stay, so they did not, but they did not grant permanent commission to women. They only allowed the women officers to continue beyond 14 years. So there were shots of women were not taken as permanent commission, but they were continuing, and they were serving as short service commissioned officers beyond 14 years. So there were several women, in fact, over 100 women officers serving in 20 years of service, 25 years of service, even 26 years of service. So with that position, they said we will apply prospectively. Secondly, the very big anomaly that they added here was that when they give permanent commission to women officers, it will be only in staff appointments. Now, again, this is a slightly technical concept. I will have to explain this a little. In Army, there are two kinds of appointments. The kind of the posts that officers hold in the Army, there are two kinds of appointments. One is staff appointments, and second is called criteria appointments. Now, if you would have confined women only to staff appointments, then they would have been denied all the meatier roles, the leadership roles, the roles which are in the front line roles of their arms. See, again, the issue was never about combat roles. The issue was not taking them into combat streams or making them, bringing them in the line of fire, or, bringing them in the infantry and all those other streams which are direct combat roles. Women were never taken into that. In the Indian Army, they are still not taken. I'll come to the Air Force and Navy a little later, because the Air Force is taking women as fighter pilots, but the Army was not taking. But they said we will confine them to staff appointments. So criteria appointments are the other kind of appointments, which are, like I was mentioning, better roles, meatier appointments, leadership positions, commands. So the commanding officers of units are, they are the criteria appointments. And then command is not the only thing. There are several appointments which are nomenclatured as criteria appointments, and they are very important and significant appointments. So we explained to the court that by confining women to staff appointments only, they were actually trying to render women as second-grade citizens in the Indian Army. And this kind of embargo was not there for women when they were when permanent commission was granted in two of the arms earlier, like I mentioned, in the Army Education Corps and the Judge Advocate General Corps. And now this was being added arbitrarily, and this would have denied these women the best fruit. And we also explained to the court that it's not like every officer will be eligible for a command position or a criteria appointment. It takes a lot to be a woman Army officer, but it takes a lot to be a man Army officer also. It's not like every woman can be an Army officer, but at the same time, it is exactly true for men also. It's not like every man has what it takes to be an Army officer. It takes a different kind of aptitude, attitude, physical fitness, suitability to be a soldier in service of the nation. But once these women had performed to their level best, they had proven themselves, then to deny them those only on the ground of their gender was highly discriminatory. We said that gender cannot be an embargo. And the third point in this implementation was that women officers would have been given the option of opting for permanent commission in just after the third year of their service, which they could exercise till 4 years of their service. So this also we objected to, and we highlighted that it has to be at par with gentlemen officers. It's not like you can have a system where women are given just after 3 years, because for gentlemen officers, there are at 3 stages, they are granted the option of permanent commission: after 5 years of service, after 10 years of service, after 14 years of service. So it has to be at par. Suitability has to be assessed, but it has to be at par option, at par availability of options for women officers. The Army then came when the final argument started, the Army came with a written note, and they gave up the issue of prospectivity. They said, okay, we will give it to women officers who are serving till 14 years of service, but they still didn't want to give it to the senior women officers. And they said, we will to the senior women officers, we will only allow them to work till pensionable service, as if it was a bounty, it was a booty, it was a concession that they were given. And they were saying, we will not give them any option of permanent commission. They can serve till they complete their pensionable service, and then they can leave. And women who have completed more than 20 is the pensionable service. Indian Army, and women who had completed 20 years, they said, we'll let them go. So this was their response. On the issue of command positions and criteria appointments, they actually took a huge resistance. They said, and then you must have seen in media, it got covered a lot, the kind of excuses that were given in the written note of the army. They said women have, they have greater biological duties, they have greater matrimonial duties, their physical standards are not as good as gentlemen officers. They said that the soldiers who actually work under the officers, they come from that kind of a social strata that they will not be able to accept commands from these women officers, and there will be a problem of disobedience and indiscipline in the Indian Army. And so on and so forth. They gave all kinds of silly excuses. I often feel that note actually became the platform on which such a brilliant judgment that we have of 17th March 2020 by a bench of Honorable Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud and Honorable Justice Ajay Rastogi. That judgment came. It's Secretary Ministry of Ministry of Defense versus Babita Punia. That's the name of the judgment. 17th February 2020 is when it was pronounced. So this written note where all these kinds of excuses were given, like I was saying, that often in a match of cricket also, if you want a very good boundary, it can't be hit on a very tight ball. You need a loose ball to be thrown, and only on that loose ball you can realize it as an opportunity and you can throw it across the boundary. So this note of 2 pages, which actually made all kinds of allegations that women are lesser beings, they have matrimonial duties, biological duties, they become mothers, they don't, pay attention here, and the soldiers will not take their commands, etc. This became the manifestation for this judgment to come, and all of these excuses were thrown out. This actually invigorated our team, our side also. Pradeep sir did not, gave me a lot of credit, but it was actually Meenakshi Lekhi ma'am who was appearing for the respondents in this case, the women officers, and I was appearing for some 50-60 women officers. So we were both, it was a team of these, we two were arguing, and we had a team of lawyers who were assisting us. And you should have seen the atmosphere in the court. When this matter was being argued, interestingly, in the judiciary also, we have a lot of court masters who are women. So the court masters, the court staff, etc., all of whom were women, they were like, you should have seen the grace and charm on their faces. That all of them were delighted when the arguments were being heard. They were very heated arguments. There used to be all these women standing in the courtroom in their crisp uniforms, standing from morning to evening, and they would be offered chairs in the courtroom, but they would be, how soldiers are, they were completely in their soldier-like demeanor. They used to be standing from morning to evening, and the courtroom for several days that the matter was being heard, it used to be quite a spectacle, and it used to be quite an experience to go through this matter in the court. And finally, when when we highlighted everything, we actually read out some of the judgments from other courts across the world. Like I was mentioning, gender issues, they transcend all geographical boundaries. The more things change, the more they remain the same. Even in the most developed of the countries, even in the most so-called progressive countries that celebrate equality, liberty, and justice, even those countries, you scratch the surface and you see that it's the same kind of battles that were fought. It was the same kind of excuses in different words. Whether it was the Israeli Supreme Court, whether because Israel today is one of the flag bearers for participation of women in combat and non-combat, all kinds of roles. Russia, whether it was France, whether it was the United States of America, it was Canada. All of these countries, many of these European countries had gone through the same struggles, UK. And, at different stages, no, there's not enough money. Logistically, we don't have enough. It's a woman. How will somebody take command from a woman? It's the same kind of words that were spoken. And it was very beautifully chronicled in these judgments. So we took the example of many of these judgments. The most important thing that the Supreme Court relied on in this is in para 71 of the judgment of Babita Punia. You will see that the Supreme Court has quoted examples of women officers who had performed exceedingly well and whose performance had been recognized by the army itself. So, whether it was Colonel Mithali Madhumita, she also had, though she was an Education Corps officer, but she also had to fight a battle for permanent commission. It was another case that I also again had the honor of representing her. But Colonel Mithali Madhumita, when she was a major, she was posted at the Afghan embassy in Kabul, the Indian embassy, in Kabul. And she was there as an Education Corps officer she was giving English classes and English language lessons to the Afghan army and also specifically to Afghani women in the Afghan army. There was a Fedayeen attack while Major Mithali Madhumita, as she then was posted there. And in that Fedayeen attack, while, the whole Fedayeen attacks are attacks they're like suicide attacks. So that was an attack that actually throwed everything helter-skelter. But Mithali ran in the eye of the storm and ensured that she saved dozens of lives. She was given a gallantry award. She was the first woman actually to be given a gallantry award in the Indian Army. And again, gallantry award is not something that you get in peacetime or, just in the course of doing your duties. Gallantry awards are specifically awards given only in wartime situations or war-like situations. In extreme hostility, like I was mentioning, proxy war situations are as, they become as important as battleground situations. In fact, more so. Because in a proxy war situation, the enemy is actually disguised with your civilian population. So that is it's a huge problem there. So Mithali's citation read that she was single-handedly responsible for saving dozens of lives, and she displayed courage under fire. And we gave examples of amazing women like that. We gave examples of women who had been awarded Sword of Honor in the course where they get commissioned as officers at the time of passing out. The officer who tops that course, and it's not there's no reservation for women, mind you. The military is not a place that you can have reservation for women. Whichever officer performs the best gets that Sword of Honor. And there were several occasions that women officers had got that Sword of Honor. Women had, performed exceedingly well in all situations. We gave examples of Squadron Leader Minty Agarwal. You will all remember Balakot strike. Wing Commander Abhinandan is somebody who became a national hero. We all know about him. He was also given a Yuddha Sena Medal, which is a gallantry award by the Indian Air Force. Along with him, there was a Squadron Leader Minty Agarwal, who was also given a Yuddha Sena Medal. And her role was not in the aircraft. See the changing nature of the modern warfare also. She was the flight controller who was actually, who was controlling, who was navigating, who was at the background. She was here at the command center, and she was navigating all of those dogfights while they were happening. Modern warfare is not about not so much. We can't eliminate it totally, but it's not so much about hand-to-hand kind of combat or the traditional kind of combat that we understand it. Modern warfare has increasingly been governed by artificial intelligence. It is missiles, it is drones, it is these flight controllers sitting at the back, and many of them they actually look like the students will know this very well, but for the faculty also, if you have younger siblings or children, you will see many of them sitting with the video games these days during the lockdown. That's what children have been doing mostly. And these flight controllers are actually performing their extremely critical modern warfare jobs in that manner itself. So we had exemplary examples of women officers that the Supreme Court took cognizance of, and the Supreme Court said that it will be an affront not only to the constitutional principles which are solidly guaranteed to every citizen of the country, and even more so to women citizens of the country. But it will also be an affront to the male officers of the Indian Army, along with whom these women have been performing shoulder to shoulder for the last almost 3 decades now. 92 is when they were commissioned. So it was not like, there was, you were walking on a path that blindfolded, that you did not know how they would perform, how they would be taken in, whether they would be suited, etc. We had the world patterns, the world trends, the world judgments had shown us that women had performed exceedingly well. It's been a long journey. We presented some of the chronicles of how it started for women. Before the First World War, women were only included in the military as nurses or as honey traps. That's how women were used before the First World War by the world. But in the First and the Second World War, to augment the forces, they had to actually take more women, because the forces were, there were huge casualties. So to augment forces, more manpower or woman power was required, and that's how women were added. And slowly this march has continued. So it's not this is a journey that is less than 100 years old for women across the world. And it was significant that the Supreme Court of our country took that step and, threw out all the flimsy, frivolous excuses that were given by the army, even after the political decision having been taken to implement that decision. So all of these three discriminatory aspects of that policy decision were removed, and the court said that they are entitled. In fact, it's interesting, the court actually uses the word stereotype at several places in the judgment. Almost 24 times the word stereotype has been used. And the court says that battling gender equality is actually about confronting the battles in the mind. Some of my clients, they sent me some of the messages that they had, their interactions with their soldiers. Just to remind you, the excuse that was taken was that the soldiers will not obey. There will be indiscipline, because they come from that kind of a social strata that they can't take women, take orders from women. Some of these soldiers, their interactions I had read with my clients, and they had said, Madam, Sir ji, badhai, Saab ji, tadke aap CEO banoge, Saab ji, aapke saath jab mauka milega main aunga, Saab ji, like that. And several beautiful messages. Tadke means tomorrow. So tadke aap CEO banoge. Becoming a CEO of your unit is a huge honor for anybody. And, my clients told me that look at the depth of these messages when our Jawans who we have served with, when they address us, they don't even see our gender. I mean, to talk about gender disparity, they don't even see us as women. They don't even see our gender. That is why they address us as Saab ji. They don't bother to address us as Madam ji. And all that a soldier, will respect is an able leader. It will not matter if what gender is that leader. And if you are a bad leader, you will not be respected whether you are a woman or a man. It actually all, bottom line, it all comes down to what is your capacity, what is your capability, how you lead your men, how you command your men, how you perform as a leader. And Indian Army is amongst the, one of the most respected armies in the world. We are the second largest army in the world, but more than that, we are amongst the most respected armies of the world. And that is for the sheer professionalism that Indian Army has displayed and courage under fire that Indian Army has displayed. And in that journey for the last 30 years, 28 years now, women have performed exceedingly well shoulder to shoulder. Almost run out of my time, but I must quickly tell you about the naval case and the Air Force case also. After this, we had judgment it was divided, like I was mentioning in the beginning, that Navy granted permanent commission, but they granted it prospectively. So the Navy matter came up for hearing after the Army judgment, and there our argument was, it was again the union's appeals, and our arguments were that, you can't deny women who have been serving. Women who are serving, they have to be given the option of permanent commission, and this is discriminatory to not give them. Navy actually came with a very novel argument. They said that we are not, this is not gender discrimination. what we are doing is we don't allow any short service officer, whether it is a male or a female, to go shift from short service to permanent. So we don't give them that option. We don't allow any short service officer to move from short service to permanent commission. Therefore, this is not gender discrimination, and this is nothing to do with gender. And in fact, Navy is the most gender neutral and gender fair. And we are. This is the argument that the naval case was premised in. Now, on the face of it, you see that it appears to be a very attractive argument. But then here we actually used another concept of law, which is called facially neutral legislations. Sometimes some things that we challenge, whether they are policy decisions or executive orders, these are on the face of it, they appear to be gender neutral. So facially neutral, on the face of it, it appears that they are neutral. But you have to dig a little deeper. You scratch the surface and you realize that in the impact of it, in the effect of it, they are actually discriminatory. And then we highlighted to the court that, for gentlemen officers, always, forever, they had the option of either joining as short service officers or joining as permanent commission officers. So even if Navy was not allowing this transition from short service to permanent commission, it was like a bigger door of permanent commission was always open, and a smaller door, in a big gate, a smaller door was also open. So gentlemen officers had the option either to go through the bigger gate or the smaller gate. Whereas for women officers, since 1992, they never had this option. So from 2008 onwards, when you're implementing and then you say you either come as short service or permanent, that is fine. But for women officers who are existing and who never had the option to come in as permanent commission officers, you can't deny them. And that also was affirmed. I'm happy to say that's Annie Nagaraj's judgment that came. In fact, that was pronounced during the lockdown period that Supreme Court pronounced. It was the same bench again, premised again on the Army judgment. Air Force case is still pending for hearing. In fact, part arguments took place, and there is only about less than 35-40 women officers who are there, who were not granted. Again, Air Force implemented from 2008 onwards. So there, it was very interesting. The bench told the lawyers appearing for the Indian Air Force that you have seen the writing on the wall. You've seen the Army judgment. You've seen the Navy judgment. Would you like to give them yourself, or do you want a judgment again from us? So they had to come back because of the lockdown. We could not have another hearing of this case, but it's waiting to happen. And so that has been the journey of gender justice for women in the armed forces. Just left for 10 minutes. I think I'll wrap up here so we can have some interaction in question answers. Thank you so much for hearing me with so much of patience, and thank you.
Wonderful, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for such enlightening words that you have shared with us. And now I request the participants to put forth any questions that they want to put across to ma'am. You can just type in chat box.
Ms. Harpreet, please take up questions which are less controversial, seeing the present position she's holding.
Don't worry, sir. If there is something that I can't answer, I will not answer that.
So we'll not like to put you in that situation.
Acha, Pradeep ji, Commander Sudhir.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I would like to, extend my profound thanks. Now I could see that how women has won these cases at Supreme Court, because she has become, the knowledge of army, defense, and all the three wings of Aishwarya has become so competent. Everything is, she is knowing about it so deeply.
So her father was a group captain in Air Force. So
I see. Yeah.
Basically.
She is, then, the entire thing, she was not even referring. So I could see that preparation has gone into medical. Aishwarya, I would like to inform you that in 92, the first batch of women education corps officers, they came to INS Shivaji Lonavala, and I was training commander over there in Naval College of Engineering. The first batch of women officers, Madhuri, Vijaya, and Subhashni, they all three came under me. and they were excellent officers. Even when I took premature retirement, all three of them, they have to sign off as a short service commission officer. I felt it very bad. So once again, congratulations, very passionately, excellently you have covered the topic, and wish you all the best for Air Force as well. I think women have got equally all capabilities and everything, and it has been proven in Israel and in US Navy as well as even on board nuclear submarines. So I wish that Air Force also will come on your way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for very kind words of yours. In fact, like Pradeep ji was mentioning, my father was in the Air Force and my father-in-law was in the Army. So, and I always tell my father that you were only commissioned in the Air Force. I was born in the Air Force because I was literally born in those SSQs, Special Sea Quarters.
Yes,
But ma'am, your passion was so imbibing. I had goosebumps listening you. And
Yeah.
you see the chat box. Chat box is full of remarks where the people are saying that this was from the straight from heart and full of conviction and passion.
Even personally, I am looking forward to meet you. Excellent. So flawless it has gone.
Yeah.
And every integrity, the minor things of combat requirements and the what way the army performs and all these logics what army has given, Air Force has given, Navy, they have got the genuine concerns, the difficult situations like at Siachen, on board nuclear submarine and then on board ships and all. But still, everything was there which you have covered very comprehensively. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very kind of you.
Ma'am, there's one question for you. So, Moshika Sharma, she has put forward this question to you that in Academy, 15 LCs got relegated just days after the Supreme Court judgment for the first time. So, does it have to do anything with the judgment? Was it out of frustration?
See, I can't really comment on that, why these cadets got relegated. If it is out of vindication in any way, then it has to be challenged. We follow a system of rule of law. It cannot be that you go ahead and just you can't, in law you can't have a scoot and shoot. It's not like media that you make a comment and no, if you feel that you have been wronged, if you feel that your constitutional guarantees have been denied to you, you have to then come to the court of law and fight your battle. Of course, it's a difficult battle. Court battles are not easy in India. In India, battles take a long time. But then these battles are important. If these women officers who have been fighting this battle since 2005 in the Delhi High Court, if they would have left it out, these battles would not become a better future for our daughters. These battles have to be fought in the right manner, and it's not really a man versus woman debate. That's why I gave examples of those the messages of those soldiers. It's actually the mindset of stereotype, the mindset of patriarchy, and in that patriarchy there is there's enough number of men in the world, in our country, in the army, everywhere, who strongly stand for women's rights, and there are enough number of women in our society, in the nation, and in the world who become part of that patriarchy. So that patriarchal mindset, that stereotype has to be shattered for our future generations' lives to become better and positive. Like Pradeep ji was mentioning earlier in his introduction, there are some problems now even after the judgment, because the JC courses that he was talking about, the junior command courses, are courses which are actually done by officers in their 5 to 6 years of standing as an officer. Now, the hierarchy and discipline and seniority is a very important, it's a sacrosanct principle almost in the defense forces, because on your senior's command, you may have to give up your life. So that seniority is very, very, it's almost like it's revered in the army. And for women officers with 20 years of standing, 15 years of standing, 25 years of standing, if you're going to ask them to do these courses with 5 to 6 years of standing, it's officers with those instructors and those officers, it is quite embarrassing and humiliating. Also, I believe that physical standards have been changed. Physical standards have been enhanced from where they were when they were commissioned. So to expect a 20-something woman to meet a particular physical standard, and then to expect a 40-something woman to meet an even higher standard of physical standard, there are lots of problems, but then they need to be fought.
Thank you, ma'am. Siddhant Grover wants to ask, a man has to be in shape one for continuing in service and getting promotion or even in command position. So do same medical standard apply to army?
That is correct. Army, the medical shape that you are in, Army, Air Force, or Navy, it's a fighting corps. It's ultimately a fighting arm, and there the physical fitness is very, very important, and that's why you, for every rank, you have time to time periodic medical assessments and medical boards that officers and soldiers, everyone has to go through. Then there are shape one. There, if there's something lacking, even an overweight can bring you down in medical category. So medical fitness is something that is very important, and command is not something that comes even easily even to gentlemen officers. That's why I was saying that it's, not every woman will have what it takes to be a soldier, but not every man will also have. But you can't have gender as a disqualification. If I'm good enough, then I must be there. In our fields also we have seen, I'm in a profession which has been a male bastion for decades and centuries. That's how it has been. I could have either come here and cribbed about it and said that, oh, sorry, it's a male bastion. It's not a nice place. I'm not enjoying it, and I'm facing so many hurdles. The struggle has been longer. Effort has been more. It has taken more dedication. But I have had incredible helping hands. If I am dedicated, if I am focused on my work, I will get incredible helping hands. And I'm sure we will all experience that in our families, in our friend circle, in our colleagues, with our juniors, with our students. A student will also see a lecturer or a teacher, how competent the teacher is, how the teacher inspires the student. It will not matter what is the gender of the student. Similarly, if a soldier has to be in the service of the nation, then the gender can never be a disqualification. Suitability alone can be the qualifying or the disqualifying factor.
Ma'am, I would like to ask a question.
Yeah.
You were saying that one has to fight one's battle. And I have met some Supreme Court judges, some practitioners. Sometimes for a common person, it becomes little difficult to knock the door of the justice, particularly in apex court. So how to bridge that accessibility? Especially, I am basically hinting on that justice is little costly. It is not inexpensive.
You're
Yeah.
right, sir. You are absolutely right in pointing that out, that, in India, at least, we don't have luxury litigation at all. People come to courts as a last resort. And it is still extremely cumbersome, extremely onerous, extremely expensive, and extremely time consuming for courts in India. In fact, when people come to us, nobody comes to lawyers in a happy state of frame of mind. They come to us probably in the lowest ebbs of their life, when they are feeling really dejected. Then they come to us. And but I must tell you that things have changed remarkably. After the constitutional mandate of free legal aid has been statutorily made into a 1987 Act of Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. Now the position has changed dramatically and drastically. There are legal services authorities and legal aid clinics which are there at the national level. It is headed by the Chief Justice of the country. At the state level, these are state legal services authorities which are headed by Chief Justices of every state. And then underneath that also, every district court in the country, imagine when I'm saying every district court in the country, every district has a district court, and that every district court has a legal services authority and legal aid clinic in the courtrooms. And let me tell you, it's many clients feel that legal aid lawyers are not very competent lawyers. That is actually a myth. Best of the lawyers volunteer for legal aid work. I have myself been a volunteer lawyer for over 20 years in the legal aid clinic of Supreme Court, and now there is inexpensive, legal assistance that is available. And initially, to start with, it was only for economically weaker sections. That if you fall below a lower, below a particular economic bracket, then only you are entitled to help from the legal aid clinics. Or if it was women and children related issues, so women and children, irrespective of their economic standing and capacity, they get access to legal aid. But now there is a concept of a middle income legal aid group also. And in that middle income legal aid group, it's not completely free, but you have to pay very, very reasonable and small sums of money, something like 20,000 or 30,000 rupees for your entire case to be handled. And these are handled very proficiently. Like I mentioned, Supreme Court Chief Justice, the Chief Justice of our country is the head of the National Legal Service Authority. And now the framework is very well laid out and very easily accessible. I think more and more people should go through these legal aid clinics, because they're working very proficiently and very efficaciously.
Thank you, ma'am. There's one more question which is related to sexual harassment of women in the army. So I would leave to your wise wisdom whether you want to take up this question.
Sure. Please ask.
Okay. So Moshika Sharma, she wants to ask about the sexual harassment that is faced by women in the army. If you have anything to comment about it.
Well, army doesn't descend from the skies. They come from the society that we live in. So if there are issues that are prevalent in the society, those issues will be there in any organization that we go in. And the data that we have in the world that we live in is not a happy data to talk about. If we talk about the data world over, and also the data specifically for India, more than 50% of sexual harassment actually happens with women in the four corners of their homes or workplaces, or by people who are in a position of trust, in a position of responsibility, in a position of authority. It is the protectors actually becoming predators. So I will not deny that this does not happen in the Indian Army. Of course, Indian Army, like I said, is something that people like you and I, form the fabric of the Indian Army, like all other institutions and organizations. I think the problem of sexual offenses and sexual harassment, even the United Nations recognizes it as the backdrop of it is the unequal power relationship between men and women across the centuries. So world is changing. We have now started, as a society, as a nation, we have started having less tolerance for less patience for these offenses, for these heinous offenses, which restrict one half of our population from contributing to the best of their capacity, from realizing their aspirations, from being contributors in the family and in the nation. Things are going to change, but I think change has to begin from home for these issues. Till the time we don't realize, that it is up to us how we bring up our daughters and our sons, who ultimately make up the society, these issues will not be sorted. But the law is there. Sexual harassment laws, in fact, Vishakha judgment of 1996 laid down guidelines for the first time. That was for one of those rare times that the Supreme Court laid down law and said that these guidelines will have the force of law till the law is laid down. The law for sexual harassment actually till then came in 2013. So the law is there. The law will take its course if the problem is very severe. Wherever there are male bastions, the problem does become more severe, whether it is the Indian Army, whether it is courts. But we have to have more and more women filling up these spaces. And we have to have men standing up for these issues, and men standing up for women's dignity. And that is how things will change, I feel.
Thank you, ma'am. I, on behalf of School of Law, fraternity extend a very hearty vote of thanks to Ms. Aishwarya Bhati for gracing your important work and sharing with us your findings and opinions today. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to Dean School of Law for encouraging us to organize this webinar. And I would also like to take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to Mr. Pragati Kumar for the perfect logistic support and guidance he has extended to all of us. Finally, I thank all the students and other participants who turned up in such great number. I thank all of your cordial cooperation to make this webinar a success. Thank you all.
Thank you
Thank you
so
very
very
much, ma'am.
much. Thank you.
Thank
It
you,
was an
ma'am.
absolute privilege and
And,
honor to be here.
and we look forward to continued guidance from your side, ma'am.
Certainly, sir. Anytime that you can allow me to interact with the students, I'll be happy to join.
We are much obliged, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.